going on, guys? I'm Zach,
I'm Levi.
and welcome to Blitz Gigs, episode 7.
All right, let's jump into it. So, Super Bowl picks. I'm dead wrong.
Yeah, rough playoff run for you, honestly. That was a couple bad weekends in a row for you.
Took a while to get there, but I mean, I got the matchup right in the end. That's what really counts to me.
That's fair.
It's not the ultimate, 32 seed, I guess, in the draft.
Yeah, I did say Philly was going to win the game. I think nobody predicted that it was going to be that kind of outcome. A 20-point blowout, which should have been like a 35-point blowout. That's ridiculous.
Just some garbage time points in the end.
Yeah, and nobody really thinks anymore of Kansas City for making it relatively a close game. But like, what a show! What a performance from Philly's defense, from how dominant Jalen Hurts looked. I said last week I thought Kansas City would key in on the run game and neutralize Saquon, which they did. He averaged like 2 yards a carry on 25 attempts. They really did everything to sell out on the run, and it paid off. Except they couldn't stop Jalen Hurts. Ultimately ended up winning Super Bowl MVP. So how do you feel about Philadelphia's performance and just how dominant of a Super Bowl win that was?
Yeah, I mean, it confirmed what we knew about their defense all throughout this year, but stuff as it is to say as a Cowboys fan, I really got to give all the flowers to Jalen Hurts for this one. Definitely, I mean, I was having this discussion with you earlier, top 2 quarterback from his class, which is one of the greatest quarterback classes in history, and the first to win a Super Bowl from it. He's one of like 5 active quarterbacks now with a Super Bowl title, and say what you will about the talent around him, like Brock Purdy had similar talent last year and was not able to put together this dominant of a performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and honestly, to take it a step further, like if we match up him and Joe Burrow from the same class, like, Jalen beat a very similar Rams team that Joe Burrow lost to in the Super Bowl, and they both beat Patrick in the playoffs, but like, I don't know if the gap from Jalen and Joe is really that large anymore. That performance from Jalen, take out that really bad pick that he threw, he was lights out. I mean, with his legs, that's only maybe like Lamar and Jaden are putting up that kind of performance with their legs. So I don't know. The gap in that class really isn't too large for me. I think Jalen Hurts has established himself as a top 6 or 7 quarterback definitively. But yeah.
And at least at this moment, he's top 5. I mean, when you take away the title expectation that Pat had this year, no, he's not a top 5 quarterback statistically. Outstanding record, and he's got 2 titles, like top 5 talent, absolutely top 1 talent, truth be told, in the league right now. But Jalen has made great strides to close that gap, like you said. So it's like, why is he not in the same conversation as a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson?
Absolutely. And, when he's been given a very competent offensive coordinator like he had in 22 with Shane Steichen and now this year with Kellen Moore, I mean, he's proven to be an MVP-ish caliber guy. I mean, only when you have that rushing upside like a Lamar, like a Jaden, like a Kyler, you really stretch the field, unlike the pocket guys do. Jalen Hurts may not have the biggest arm. He may not be the most accurate quarterback in the league, but his style of football, throwing 23, 25 times a game and lighting it up on the ground is just, that's the recipe for success. I mean, they have a dominant roster, but they definitely couldn't have done that without Jalen.
Yeah, absolutely. And Coach Sirianni made that point earlier in the week that, no quarterback has ever won a Super Bowl without help around him. We've seen teams with more help do less than what the Eagles did this year. And, I'm probably one of the biggest Joe Burrow fans in the world. He's got a better receiving room than Jalen, and he had a better receiving room in that title run that he took in the 2021 season. Mm-hmm. Definitely not the same backfield, but decent protection, decent defense. Like, it's not like this Philly team is the best team in history. It's just really well constructed, and it's all built around Jalen. He's got the keys to the offense. Just give him his flowers while you can.
100%. And, I made the point on TikTok earlier this week, like, how does this Philadelphia roster, this championship team, how does this stack up within the last decade or so of champions? I mean, is this maybe the best champion we've seen in the last decade? Is this one of the best championship teams of all time? Like, because they're absolutely loaded. I mean, how do they stack up?
I mean, I'd say the only team that I can compare it to is Tom Brady's Bucks that first year, and they were not as dominant in the playoffs as this Philly team. Yeah, they had a similar outing against the Chiefs, in the Super Bowl. But prior to that, they almost got bounced by the Packers on like a 3-pick Tom Brady game, which is very rare. Jalen has played near flawless football since week 4. And, I mean, since Nick Sirianni shaved his head, they only have one loss. So it's like you look at all the details of how this season went down and how they said it was kind of, one-dimensional. I was the first person to say that Kellen Moore couldn't figure out how to use these weapons, and it was just Saquon. It was just the running game. But then for the Super Bowl, they subvert all expectations, and it's just on Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and A.J. Brown, and it's the passing game, and it's all on Jalen Hurts' shoulders. So I look at that and I say this is a very well-rounded team, one of the best constructed rosters we've ever seen. It's Tom Brady's Bucs with a better backfield and maybe a worse quarterback, but like at that point in Brady's career, can you really outright say that he was playing better football than Jalen Hurts is playing right now? I do not believe that.
That's totally fair. And to your point with Kellen Moore, we're going to touch on him a little bit more later, but it's going to be really interesting to see, how much of Jalen Hurts' success is predicated on a very good OC. I think going back to what the original question was, I think Jalen Hurts, I think this Eagles team is one of the best champions we have had in the last decade, and I think Jalen Hurts right now is probably a better player than Tom Brady was. I mean, he has the intangibles that Brady had in 21, but the rushing upside, like I said before, it's just like it's so one of one. You know what I mean? He's so much more of a physical runner than a guy like Lamar is, and it really shows. I mean, they got a touchdown off the tush push. Like, those things matter. There's only like Josh Allen, would have been the kind of guy that would have made that tush push. Like it's just a one-of-one player. Jalen Hurts is maybe not the flashiest passer in the world, but he gives them just enough success. And I mean, I think it's probably like up to 14 or 15 of the last games that he's started and finished, they've won, like 15-0. Like, that's ridiculous. How many other quarterbacks have started and finished 15 straight games and have won all of them? Like, I don't even think Pat has done that before. It's just a phenomenal run that they're on right now, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see if it can carry over to the next year.
Yeah, and I think a large part of it is going to come down to who they get for that OC role. We're going to talk a little bit more about Kellen Moore later, but his departure to the Saints, I don't think it's great for his career to step away from a guy like Jalen. I think Jalen is going to be one of the survivors of this coaching switch-up. Saquon Barkley being another one of them. I don't think Kellen Moore's run schemes are incredible because, when he took over as the offensive coordinator in Dallas, his Zeke regressed. Call it age, but, I mean, Saquon's at this age doing it purely off of his athleticism, I believe. And I don't think many offensive coordinators can mess up what they have going on in Philly right now. I just think there's way too much talent on that offense that's going to be retained for another year. I think they will have a top offense in the league next year once again.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So with that being said, I think we should, switch sides here and look at the Kansas City side. I mean, going into it, I feel like the consensus was that they were going to pull away, whether it be refs or special treatment or just, more talented QB, whatever it may be. Everybody was saying that the Chiefs were going to win this game. What went wrong?
You could call it a lack of preparation, but I don't really think that's necessarily in Andy Reid's character. He's not Mike McCarthy. He's an old guy, but very new school tricks on offense. And that defense, while they allowed 40 points, I think anybody would have allowed 40 points to that Philly team in the shape that they were in and with the expectation that Saquon's going to get 25 carries. Yeah, he did get 25 carries, but that was not the main show. Just an absolute switch up for the Super Bowl by this Philly offense that, I'm sure threw Steve Spags for a loop. And on offense, I mean, 2 turnovers don't help at all. But as much as they wanted to run the ball, I don't think they had a bona fide RB1 in that game. Kareem Hunt has been the best rusher this year. Isaiah Pacheco the last couple years, they label him an angry rusher, but like the stats aren't there to show that he's an RB1 of the playoff caliber. Like we would think of a Josh Jacobs or a James Cook even. He's just not to that level, let alone a Saquon or a Derrick Henry level. In addition to their receivers, like these are guys that weren't here a year ago. They're not going to be here next year. I don't think there's a lot of team synergy and chemistry the way that we're used to seeing from like Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce exclusively. Mm-hmm. And so whereas I was so convinced that just because they've been here and they've done it so many times, it was going to carry over into this year. Yeah, they made it to the bowl. They made it to the big game. But at the end of the day, I don't think this entire team was on the same page.
Yeah, I think I want to start off with what you said about the rushing game. I mean, they really only had like 7 or 8 carries the entire game. They didn't even try to run the ball. I don't want to put too much blame on Spags and the defense because their one goal going into the game, like we said before, was to stop the run, and they did that. Jalen Hurts torched them, but like, what are you going to do? If he's dropping back 20 times and he takes off.
Yeah, and I mean, he went for like 40 yards, like in crucial moments. That's an absolute dagger, but it wasn't insane. All-purpose rushing, they got maybe 100 yards.
Exactly, and I don't want to blame this game on Spagnuolo really at all. I think like going into the second half, like 14 points were on him. There was a pick six on Mahomes. That's not the defense's fault. There was another pick that Pat threw that wasn't good. There was a fumble
in the red zone,
right? And there was a fumble later in the game that, I mean, Mahomes got clobbered on it, and that's not Spags' fault that they got points out of that. So I really don't want to put much, if any, blame at all on Spags. I think, honestly, this is one of the worst, if not the worst, games of Patrick Mahomes' career. I mean, he kind of looked like a deer in headlights out there. The stats at the end of the game aren't going to show it, but he looked like a deer in headlights out there. Like, the guy just couldn't find the open guy. I mean, when there was a play early on where he missed Kelsey, it was like 3rd and short, and he threw it just right at his feet, and I was like, that's not my homie. That's not the kind of play that we see from him, especially in a crucial spot like this. I think the 3-peat lights were just a little bit too big for him, and it showed. I mean, the play calling was very questionable from Andy, but I think if I was to put the biggest blame on a unit for Kansas City, it's got to be the O-line. And, you got to think that they're going to invest a lot in that in this offseason. Trey Smith is probably going to walk, but you can't afford to have a performance like that in the Super Bowl again. This is the second time that the O-line has just had Mahomes running for his life. And we see how much trouble it gives guys like Joe Burrow and others when, they have no time to throw the ball. You can have as many elite receivers or an elite quarterback back there slinging the rock. It's not going to matter. So some changes need to be made personnel-wise up front for Kansas City. I didn't think the talent gap was massive going into this game, but I mean, in the trenches, it just showed. I mean, Philly's really, I mean, not even just Philly, but like the successful teams in this league have really cracked the code as far as where you need to be strong and where you can afford to maybe bite the bullet on talent-wise. And it's the trenches. Teams like Philly, Detroit, Buffalo, Minnesota, etc. Like, these teams invest a lot in their offensive line and in a bona fide top-tier edge rusher. And you see it pay off with Jalen Carter and Josh Sweat having amazing games in this Super Bowl. Jalen had all the time in the world to throw the ball. Mahomes was running for his life the second after he snapped it. So, had Mahomes played a good game, I don't know if that would have changed the outcome too much. It probably would have been a little closer, but it was a rough showing out there for Kansas City.
Absolutely, and the closest thing I can compare it to is that Dallas Green Bay game just a couple years ago. Just some horrible beats from Dak Prescott, including a pick six and I think 2 turnovers in total. That just put the defense in a position where they couldn't win. And so then by the end of the game, Dallas is up to like 20 points just on garbage time, but like, it doesn't matter. You're playing from behind the entire time. And in that game, it was even worse because Aaron Jones was doing his thing on that Green Bay offense in addition to Jordan Love. Whereas in this game, it's like, yeah, they shut down Saquon and it didn't matter. Like, you just can't stop that Philly offense no matter what you do. So, yeah, just a poor showing from each side. The better team won. The team with the better roster,
1,000%.
a comparable defensive coordinator. I couldn't even name you the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. Not that it matters, but they have the better play caller, sure. They have the better offensive mind in Andy Reid, but at the end of the day, Philly's just the better team.
Yeah, I think, as far as play calling goes, after a couple drives and you realize the offensive line's not going to hold up for a long period of time in pass protection, I think you got to invest more in the running game, and you got to invest more in the short passing game. I didn't see a screen until I believe the fourth quarter to Xavier Worthy, and like, you just got to take those, those checkdowns. You got to be able to have some gimmies here and there, because if Mahomes is back there and there's pressure in his face every single play, and you're not giving him a chance running the ball, of course you're not going to have a good offensive showing. But something I did want to ask you is, at what point were you like, oh, like Kansas City, this isn't even going to be competitive. Like, this is getting out of hand very quickly. Like, at what point did you realize, wow, this isn't even like, this is JV versus varsity. This isn't even close.
There were 2 or 3 points where I really thought, oh, this is the last chance for Kansas City to turn their momentum around. But before the end of the second quarter, it was basically put on ice. Just from, Kansas City's going to get the ball back at the half, but they have no momentum, and it's already a 3-4 score game. Like, what are they going to be able to do? Mm-hmm. What are they going to string together that's going to change the fact that this Philly defense is young, talented, fast, and that this Philly offense is literally unstoppable, and that if they want to, they can just hand the ball off to Saquon, and he's probably going to fight for that 3.5 yards that it takes to ice the clock and just get your first down and 3 carries. I'd say by the second or third score, it just became apparent that this was a Philly team that's much better than this Kansas City team. You don't see teams that are supposed to be competitive in championships go down that far. With the exception of maybe like the Cincinnati Bengals on their run, they were down 3 scores to the Chiefs, and then they came back and won the game in late overtime. But like, we knew that team was special because they were moving the ball, and it was just bad breaks in the red zone. And like, this team could not even move the ball. Pat had like 50 yards in the first half, which is like a career low.
Not even. It was, they had a first down on the first play of the game. Set that aside, they had the rest of the first half, 0 first downs and 23 yards of offense. Like, that's just unheard of in any football game, let alone the Super Bowl. But I think when it was 10-0, I wasn't, checked out of it yet. I think Mahomes has been down 10 points in every Super Bowl that he's won, so I don't think it was a reach to say, oh, absolutely, they're still in this. Mahomes comes from behind all the time. But when he just threw the air and pick 6, it's like we don't see Pat.
That's not like him at all.
Absolutely. And, they get the ball right back. They're down 17-0. It's like, all right, margin for error is very small here. You're going to need to go down and get some points and keep this competitive. And they go 3 and out. And it's like, oh, this Kansas City team's not prepared for what the Eagles had. And, like, I was stunned, honestly. I had no idea that Philly's defense was of that caliber. Like, I knew they had a good unit, but I think everybody underrated, the talent that they had over there. They really just, like, wow.
It's going to be some tough conversations this offseason for Kansas City if they want to get back into championship caliber, or if they want to kind of soft rebuild, use this next 1 or 2 years of Pat's deal when he's still only making $45 million, which is insane, by the way. That's already like low A-tier quarterback money. Probably around that number 10 mark in the league now that we got a couple 55s and a 60. Gonna have to say goodbye to some of those receivers. I know we've talked about, potentially trying to retire Travis early. He's got another year on this deal, but he's taking $17 million. Like, if you could put that in the O-line right now, you'd be a lot better off. And on the defense, there's going to be some tough conversations as well. That defense has been, top 5 in scoring in the last 5 or 3 years since they let go of Tyreek and save that money. But I just don't know where they're going to be able to, to make the strides that Philly has made the last couple of years.
Right. And just to name a couple of free agents that they are probably going to lose out on, you have guys like Nick Bolton on the defense, guys like Justin Reed, those guys have been huge impact players for him. Offensively, Kareem Hunt is a free agent. You have Pacheco on a deal for another year or two. Even though he wasn't the better back this year, are you going to bring Kareem back? We mentioned Kelsey. Hollywood and D-Hop are going to be out of there. I think if you're looking at reorganizing the talent scheme in this team, letting those 2 one-year deal receivers go might just have to be the move. Rasheed, when he was healthy, was a pretty proven wide receiver 1, and Xavier Worthy, is probably the only bright spot for Kansas City in the Super Bowl. I mean, he looked like he can hang with the big dogs. Like he's a wide receiver one in this league for sure. So I think you've relatively solved your receiver issue. I think you're going to want to draft a tackle in the first round, and whatever cap you have remaining, give it to Nick Bolton, give it to Justin Reed, and hope that the defense looks the same next year, because, I mean, those are two of their best guys. I mean, take out Chris Jones. Those are probably like the third or fourth best players on that defense. It's not going to look like the same unit without them. I mean, how would you go about this offseason if you're Kansas City losing some key guys like that?
Yeah, I mean, the benefit is that you're not on a short clock with Pat Mahomes. And so I really think the answer is going to be, I mean, you want to respect Travis. If he wants to play, you got to let him play, but try to push him towards retirement as much as you can. Like, it's not going to be pretty this next year. They've got a lot of cap situation to work out, and he doesn't want to go out a loser. So it's like, you could lose in the Super Bowl, or we could not make the playoffs next year, and you get to decide which is going to be the end of your legacy. You've got to keep some of that defense together. Some of that defense. I know you have some young talent, but you've really got to consider throwing whatever bag you have to at Justin Reed, even if that's at the expense of your O-line. Just let your O-line get younger. Like, Joe Thuney has been with the Patriots dynasty, and now he's with your dynasty. Like, your O-line is expensive, and it's aging, and you need to get younger there. The same way you did on defense a couple years ago, and everybody is just so young and talented. Like, consider having those conversations in your O-line. Let your defense get their money now.
Yeah, and to your point about Travis, I mean, forcing him into retirement doesn't sound easy, but, like, let's look at the facts here. Like, the guy doesn't seem in love with the sport anymore. I mean, he's got all the attention with T Swift, obviously, but, I mean, he's got the podcast thing going. He's one of the most popular people in the world. Big-time celebrity, big-time, party guy, Gronk type of personality in the offseason. Everybody gets along with Travis, but, like, where's his love for the game like he used to have? I think that's a little bit something that's underrated in this conversation is, does he want to play another year and go through another training camp? And, I mean, yeah, it's $17 million, but does he have the passion to be a top-tier tight end anymore? Because, yeah, he's getting old, and that's part of it, but it doesn't seem like I'm not going to question his work ethic, but it doesn't seem like he wants it like he used to.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And he's at the age where it's like, you give him 17 because of his namesake and not because of what he produces anymore. Like, an 800-yard season from a tight end is good. It's not great. It's not worth 17 the way you would pay George Kittle or the way you'd even pay Dallas Goedert at this point. He's just not as competitive as he used to be. And he's not losing his connection with Mahomes, but he's losing his talent. And because of that, like, he's not on the same level. He's not worth spending that much money on for Kansas City. So I think Kansas City seriously has to consider forcing him into that decision, as difficult as it may be. You want to pay your respect to him. Obviously, you want him to go out on his terms. But, the Pats threatened to trade Gronk, and Gronk retired at that point in time. Just because, they gave me the choice, and I chose not to play anymore. And I think Trav might be close to making that decision the same way Jason did last year.
100%.
You want to flip over to basketball?
Yeah, let's do it. So Luka Doncic made his Lakers debut yesterday night, and it went pretty well. Lakers pulled off a win. What are your initial thoughts on Luka and his first stint with LeBron James and the Lakers?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't drop 40, but I don't think he needed to. This is a Lakers offense that has been very serviceable, functional for the last handful of games, and they're fifth in the West right now. I think they'll continue to run this hot streak and have some serious playoff discussions with Luka incorporating himself into the offense. But I think they're trying to ramp him up slowly and have him learn some Lakers offense before he takes over the Lakers offense. I don't think they're meant to be built around a guy like him right this second. And as they continue to build size and get some defensive help, maybe they will be. But while Bron is there, Bron is still the main thing. Keep the main thing. Luka can find ways to make plays elsewhere, but he doesn't need to be the most on-ball, like, scoring machine that he has been in Dallas right now.
100%. And, Austin Reeves was having a good game last night. And, we see LeBron James before the game saying, Luka, don't fit in. like show out, go be yourself. We will play around you. You're the star of this team. And Austin Reeves was having a good night last night, and he just deferred to him, and that's totally okay. He was putting the playmaker hat on that he has the ability to do from time to time, and he just deferred to Austin Reeves and LeBron, and they both had solid nights, and it amounted to a win. So I think something interesting to consider as they've ascended to the 4 seed in the West. Houston dropping a couple games this last couple weeks, so Houston has fallen to the 5, and the Lakers are the 4 seed as of recording this video. And, championship discussions are definitely going to start to heat up the higher they get in the rankings. So we discussed it at the time of the initial trade, but how close is this Lakers team to being a championship contender?
I mean, defense wins championships, but look at the Eagles, man. They just got off to a great start, and because of that, they were able to play that aggressive defense and pull some nasty interceptions. Like, obviously it's a whole different game, but when you're able to have 3 30-point scores in one night, then what's the competition? What defense do you need? We have yet to see. We've never seen 2 superstars of this caliber. Obviously one's in his 40s now, but the 40-year-old LeBron James and the 25-year-old Luka Doncic, like, just absolutely running the floor. Like, it's a 2-man show. But then Austin Reeves just fits in the mix, and they retained Dalton Connect after that trade fell through. So it's like, with that many scores, it's bound to go wrong. But can it really go wrong? Like, if they control the things that they can control, no unforced errors, no turnovers, then, like, where can it go wrong?
Yeah, and I mean, a large portion of the NBA community is or has been under the mindset that, as long as LeBron James is healthy and playing, whatever team he's on is a championship contender. And, those days may be a couple years overdue, but we've never seen LeBron be the second best player on a team. Luka Doncic at this point in time is a younger, better player than LeBron James. And, LeBron is a better defender. He's more athletic, even at his age. But Luka Doncic is going to be the engine of this team. And, LeBron James and his nutritionist and, physical therapist, et cetera, are going to get Luka into a good enough shape to where he's not going to gas out in these playoffs. I think it's going to be very interesting if Luka continues the pace that he was on in Dallas and continues to drop 30, 35-point triple-doubles in the playoffs, and how LeBron and Austin Reeves can just play off of that. Like you mentioned the defensive aspect, but, like, we're going to score 130 points every night, try and beat us. I mean, that's what Dallas did last year with record-setting offensive rating, and they made the finals. They built a defensive team around him, but they were still shattering offensive records because Luka's so dang efficient. So, he does still have that lingering injury, but if he's able to work through it and this Lakers team gets into the playoffs healthy, I think they'll be a force to reckon with for sure. But so you mentioned the Dalton Connect thing. So last week, right at the trade deadline, the Lakers tried to trade for Mark Williams of the Charlotte Hornets. The trade falls through because of the physicals. I believe it was Mark Williams not passing the physical. Some injury concerns there. He's been an injury-prone player his career thus far. So the Lakers are going to retain their late picks and Cam Reddish and Dalton Connect. This morning they signed Alex Len to play center for them, add some size. What are your thoughts on, one, the trade falling through, and 2, them signing a guy like Alex Len? How desperate are they?
I mean, obviously they were quick to make a move at the deadline to try and fill that hole, but last night it didn't look like that big of a need. And last night it's the Jazz, so, like, who's really worried about it? But let's just see what we got here. Let's see before we rush into any signings and we force ourselves to divide playing time when we could just be scoring that 130 a night. Let's just see how this offense runs and if they're dominant enough to do it without a defense.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the Alex Len thing, he's not going to be an elite, rebounder, elite defensive stopper that maybe Anthony Davis was, but they're just trying to patch a hole in the ship. There is a drastic need at center for them. They do need size. They waived Christian Wood earlier today, who's more of an offensive guy, not really the defensive mold that they're looking for at big man right now. So hopefully Alex Len, with him being like 7'1", is just able to be there and block shots. That's all you can really hope for from your big man position, and that's all you really need when you have LeBron and Luka. Probably going to be one of the most explosive offenses ever. So, very excited to see how that plays out, and if they're able to manage with a below average big man for sure. But moving on to the Golden State Warriors. So Jimmy Butler also made his debut a few days back, and the Warriors are 2-0 since trading for him. How do you feel about Jimmy in a Golden State uniform thus far?
I mean, Jimmy got his wish, and he's a contender at this point. The Warriors are contenders in my eyes, and I view Steph in a similar light to how we view LeBron, which is just if he's healthy, if he's there, they're always going to be in contention for that championship. But with the loss of Clay, there was a need for some superstar help around Steph, and I think Jimmy's a great fit, a great hustle in the playoffs at least, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do down the stretch, just when everything clicks. But like right here, right now, 2-0. How long do we really need to wait for them to find that chemistry? I think Jimmy and Steph are just both bona fide winners. They have their eyes set on the trophy, and who's going to stop them?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's been very exciting to see somebody with a complete opposite skill set from Steph Curry be on the floor with him, and it worked pretty seamlessly. You mentioned them in the playoffs and the hustle aspect of Jimmy. I think him and Draymond being on the court at the same time defensively and in a big spot in the playoffs is going to be must-see. These are two of the most elite defenders of the last decade, and that'll be very exciting for sure. I think that they suffer from the same problem that the Lakers have, which is a defensive anchor in the middle, and having that size. They lose James Wiseman a few years back, and prior to that, it was kind of just plug and play guys. During their dynasty, it was guys like Festus Ezeli and others that really weren't there to do much more than just grab rebounds and, play defense in the paint. So if we're able to get some prime performances out of Steph in these playoffs, I think that they'll be a force to reckon with. I don't know if they have as high of a ceiling as LA for sure. The West is just so deep. You got, the Thunder are 43-9 right now, and it's very hard to pick against a young superstar like Shea, and other teams like Denver who have championship track records. It'll be very tough to make it out of the West this year 100%, but I don't know if I'd agree that Golden State is a contender this year, just for the fact that they are in such a hole right now. I believe they're like the 9 or 10 seed as well, so they're definitely fighting an uphill battle, but
playing from behind, but playing at the rate that they're playing at with Jimmy, it'll be very interesting to see down the stretch.
For sure. So as of a couple hours ago, the Miami Dolphins signed Bobby Slowick to be their passing game coordinator, and I gotta say that's like about as A+ of a hire as you can get. Miami's passing game last year was atrocious. Seeing a tight end or halfback screen every other play was pretty awful to watch, I gotta say. So bringing a guy like Bobby Slowick in, who had such great success with C.J. Stroud in his rookie year, I think that's about as good of a hire as you can get. What do you think?
Yeah, I was really disappointed to see him be let go from Houston. Like, he's incredibly talented, and he's churned a lot out of that very young Houston offense. But I think it's the guiding hands that Tua needs right now. Mike McDaniel's play calling is very inconsistent at best. Tyreek Hill's not always showing up. You want somebody who can just make something out of nothing with that offense. Not that offense is nothing. There's a lot of talent there with Devon Achane and obviously Jalen Waddle just getting his extension. Jonnu Smith becoming a top 5 to top 3 tight end for that final stretch of the year. But I think I'm not counting on him taking over play calling, but would you be very optimistic that he might, and if he does, that it would get the best out of that offense?
I mean, I'm sending a prayer for sure. I mean, I was calling for Mike McDaniel to give up the play calling all year last year. He's from that Shanahan, San Fran tree, as is Slowick. But, in 2022, the play calling was pretty fantastic. I mean, the offense was as explosive as we've ever seen. Dropping 70 points on a team is unheard of. And, you fast forward to this year, and post to a concussion, the offense just got so conservative. There was no downfield passing threat at all, and it was very bizarre because the year before there was a lot of deep crossing routes. There was a lot of, timing related throws. And I don't know if it was, a change in play calling based on the Tua injury or if it was a lack of personnel or whatever the case may be. But, the play calling from Mike McDaniel this year was just bizarre, honestly. It wasn't warranted. I don't think it made any sense to go ultra conservative. And, I appreciated that we leaned more on the run game. But, bringing in Sloak as the passing game coordinator, I think it's going to take this passing game to heights that it was in 23. I'm very excited for it. I really do hope that Slowick does end up getting some play calling opportunities because McDaniel is an elite scheme guy, but he's not an elite play caller. And I think that's the difference between, some of these elite offenses, Andy Reid and Shanahan and McVay. Like, these guys know how to scheme with the best of them, but they also know when to call the right plays, So that'll be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much more to add to that other than, as far as Tua goes, I think they were really trying to shield his image with the rest of the league. I don't think the Dolphins want to appear one-dimensional. So when Tua loses his ability to throw downfield, they're going to not make it obvious that he lost his ability to throw downfield. I'm not saying that he's never going to be back to that deep ball passing accuracy that he had in 2023, but I am saying that they should give him this offseason to bulk back up and, let Slowick have his way with that offense and whatever adjustments need to be made to get them back to that top 5, top 10 offense discussion. And once they're there, let Tua air it out. You've still got some of the fastest receivers in the league. Mm-hmm. You've got a dynamic backfield, and you've got Jonnu Smith, who's been an incredible pickup for you guys. Like, I have no question that Tua could perform like a top 10, top 5 quarterback again with the right scheme.
100%. And, you bring up Jonnu Smith, and the big issue with that 2023 unit was that we didn't have a tight end. It was, Durham Smythe, who's a blocking tight end at best. That was the one hole that was really on that explosive passing unit. And, this offensive line isn't great. I'm constantly calling for the trenches to be built up in Miami. Love to see some more protection for Tua, but at the end of the day, this unit isn't quite as bad as the unit that Slowick just had in Houston. So I think he will be able to get some more out of it. I think it'll be a better unit than Houston was this past year, despite them having guys like Nico and Steph Diggs, etc. But very excited for it.
For sure. Now we can pivot to the Cowboys. Mm-hmm. I know earlier both of us came across the same Dak Prescott headline that he says we're not very far from the Eagles.
Gotta say, not great timing.
Not great timing at all, and he acknowledged that in the clip. But I want you to hear me out. I'm not saying we're not far from the Eagles. The Eagles are the best roster in football, one of the better coaching staffs, probably top 5 to top 10 coaching staffs.
I would agree.
And we have Shoddy, who has no head coaching experience, similar to a Nick Sirianni, who had, I don't know what kind of coaching experience at all. Madden coaching experience, maybe. We have an O-line coach now as our offensive coordinator, not calling plays because the head coach always calls plays in Dallas for some reason. Our defensive coordinator is ex-Bears head coach, Matt Eberflus. But our position coaches look really good. All the hirings that Ryan Schottenheimer has made have been excellent, mostly college guys, young guys. I think they're trying to euthanize that offense in a way that Jerry never would. Jerry loves to hire his guys, and these are not Jerry guys at all. They're all poached from other units. Case in point, our offense coordinator is the Arizona Cardinals offensive line coach. I'm looking forward to seeing if this is some kind of Frankenstein's monster that's going to wreak havoc on the East and steal some road games from Philly and Washington, or if it's just going to be the absolute worst coaching unit we've ever seen just because of the inexperience. But in any case, it's going to come down to some of the more experienced players in Dallas. We haven't drafted well the last couple years, short of a couple bright spots like DeMarvion Overshone in round 3 of the 2023 draft. Dak's got his deal. CD's got his deal. They need to perform to a much higher level this year. I'd love to see another 1,500-yard season out of CD and another 30 to 10 Dak season. And we were just very far from that this past year. So I look at the roster and I say 2 years ago, Philly wasn't far roster-wise from where they are now. Dallas was near identical to what it is now, and Dallas won the division.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference there was just some injuries on the Philly roster that they couldn't overcome because their coaching just didn't pull them out.
Mm-hmm.
The Dallas coaching regressed. We'll see what it is this year. It's apparently to appease Dak that we hired Brian Schottenheimer. But it's Dak's offense. It's really Dak's team at this point. It's Jerry's team, obviously, but everything seems to be built around him. And with that in mind, if he says this is a great unit, I kind of want to trust him because he did have the best year statistically of any quarterback in 2023. I think he knows how to get production out of these guys.
That's very interesting. I got to say there's a lot I disagree with, and I'm going to give you a chance to respond to all of it. But I think starting off, the second the New York Giants take a quarterback at pick 3 this year, I think the Dallas Cowboys will be the worst team in the division. The Schottenheimer move was questionable at best. It was mind-blowing, honestly, that you go with the guy that nobody was considering. I know you mentioned he's Dak's guy. McCarthy was also Dak's guy, and he was in-house, so why not just give him a deal? I think the offense, as long as CD and Dak are together, they'll be a relatively explosive unit. They're not Philly, man. Philly and Washington are miles above Dallas as far as talent on the roster goes, and Washington is in a situation where they're only going to get younger and better.
I have to disagree with half of the Washington statement for the sake of, yes, they're going to get miles better. They have $80 million in cap space, but their best player on defense is like Bobby Wagner.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say Marshawn Lattimore is probably their best player on defense, but to each their own. I think Bobby Wagner, whether they re-sign him or they let him go because he's old, I don't think it really matters. I think they're going to draft mostly entirely defensive, and they're going to go get a guy like Myles Garrett or, go get a Khalil Mack, somebody who's going to just give him production. And they have all the money. They have all the draft picks to go make a move like that. I know you love your Dallas guys, as does Jerry, but the Washington team is, at least if we're just talking NFC East, they're most certainly on the come up, and Jane Daniels is rising. And the Dallas team, when it was 12-5, 12-5, 12-5, and 7-10 last year, I think they're maybe a 5-win team with an explosive offense. I just don't see, I always say success isn't linear, but I don't see how Dallas's trajectory all of a sudden skyrockets back up with a bizarre head coach, an old, unathletic Dak Prescott. They have CD and Micah who are fantastic, but outside of that, where are the bona fide guys? You know what I mean? Trevon Diggs is hurt and getting older, and he's, loud and, makes headlines and things like that. Like Deron Bland got hurt last year, if I'm not mistaken. DeMarcus Lawrence is old. The O-line has holes in certain spots. There's a lot of holes on this Dallas roster that I don't think people, have processed yet. They're a lot further than contention than they were 2 years ago, which I thought was relatively far in and of itself.
I don't disagree that we are regressed as a roster from that triple 12-5 stretch, but I do have to say that we're not more than one draft out of being back to that 12-5 mark. And I think we had some lucky breaks. The division was weak, easier schedules, whatever you want to say, make as many excuses as you want for the Cowboys, but put all that aside. If we get Ashton Jeanty in the draft and we hit on one or two other defensive interior picks, we don't have to make that many free agency signings this year with the right draft. It's really got to be Micah Parsons and maybe another receiver to supplement Brandon Cooks leaving.
But with 2 bad drafts in a row, are you thinking that it's just going to be a good draft?
It's the same drafting core staff that picked Micah Parsons when the Giants passed up on him for no reason to trade back for Kadarius Toney, and picked up CeeDee Lamb and drafted one of the best O-lines we've ever seen in the 2010s, and that picked Dak Prescott in the 4th, and he was expected to be the franchise guy. little Cowboys trivia for you. He was originally supposed to wear number 10 because he was the successor to 8 and 9, which were Aikman and Romo. He chose number 4 because it's his mom's birthday.
Interesting.
How do you take a 4th-round guy and say he's going to be the franchise guy? I don't know. We also like Paxton Lynch in that draft, so I'm not saying the method is flawless, but I am saying that sometimes they know what they're doing in these drafts. We are terrible at free agency. Jerry is terrible at free agency. But if he throws Micah a big fat deal and we have a good draft, I don't think we're far behind Philly. I think we are ahead of Washington. We split the series with Washington this year, man. We split the series with Washington, and Cooper Rush was our quarterback.
You split the series with a Washington team that had like 5-win expectation. Like, y'all, the expectation for Washington and Dallas going into this year versus what the actual outcome was were totally flipped. Like, ceiling for Washington with a rookie quarterback, a garbage defense, and a proven failure as a head coach.
Cooper Rush, bro.
Fair.
Cooper Rush was starting that game.
100%. That's totally
Mike
right.
Zimmer was the DC, and like he got it together by the end, but like obviously Dan Quinn is the better DC.
For sure. I mean, that's not even a debate, but like, I just disagree with the premise that Washington and Dallas are anywhere near the same caliber team right now. One is young and ascending, and the other one is old and crumbling.
I'm gonna love to clip this in a year, whichever way it goes. This is gonna be such a fun season. I don't care what happens with Philly. Philly's probably gonna dog walk us in Jerry World again, but put the curtains up. Dallas goes 2-0 on Washington next year.
That's ridiculous.
We should have gone 2-0 this year, bro. It was one scary Terry play away.
You're talking in hyperbole, brother. This is ridiculous. You know, us getting into this conversation actually reminds me. I think last week we were having a discussion over Instagram, and it was about the Cowboys and what caliber of team they are, and those triple 12-5 seasons. I came from the standpoint that they were never a Super Bowl contender, no matter how many 12-win seasons they were rattling off. And he told me that that was wrong and that they weren't, that they were a Super Bowl contender, essentially. And I said that they were on the same tier as an above average to mid team like Miami, like the Colts, like the Saints of the last 5 to 10 years. So I want to reopen this can of worms because you saying that you're on pace with Washington, you're on the same tier as them. Like I said, I disagree with it, but Washington is in that Super Bowl contender discussion. They've made it to a conference championship. Dallas has not. Until you make it to at least a conference championship game, I don't think you can justify saying you're a contender.
I can understand that, but 4 teams make it to the conference championship every year, and there are more than 4 contenders every year. Going into the regular season, you mean to say that there's not 5 teams that could win it all? Going into next year, we're going to say Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Ravens, Commanders.
I guess. I mean, that's 5, but at the same time...
Obviously, the windows close as the year goes on, but I don't think it's reasonable to say that if you don't make the conference championship, you're not a contender.
Okay, fair, but there's a difference between Lamar making the conference championship last year, and yeah, he didn't make it this year, but he's made it in a recent period of time. Dallas has not.
That's totally fair. But Washington did it this year to everyone's shock. The expectation doesn't have to be there all year for you to make it happen.
That's fair.
Washington contended this year in spite of their expectations. The expectations are abysmally low for Dallas next year. This was like a 9-win line in Vegas this past year, the 2024 season, and it's probably even lower next year. But when Dak Prescott is healthy, he has the capability to run a top 5 offense.
I understand what you're saying, and I think Dak will put together a good unit next year. I don't think that's the argument here. I just disagree that Dallas, under the Dak Prescott era, has ever been a Super Bowl contender.
Look, man. It's an aging Tom Brady, but did you watch Tom Brady's last career game?
The game that Brett Maher missed like 8 kicks?
He missed 4, for the record.
Excuse me.
But Dak had 5 all-purpose touchdowns.
Okay.
And that was an excellent defensive performance, and it was like 30-13 or something.
Was it 2022?
And that was a 1-score loss to San Fran in the divisional round. I don't. Granted, it was the most humiliating one-loss game or one-score loss in history when you consider that it was Zeke Elliott lined up as center for the last play. Take away that one play, man, and how close is Dallas to being in that chip? You know? Very close. Very close. Some very impressive performances from that year, and that was the year that Dak threw like 15 picks in 10 games. So on an off year for Dak, he's still churning out these crazy performances. Then Dak has his best career year in 2023 with Brandon Cooks as receiver too at 30 years old. That's insane. I think with the right unit around him, yes, they can be contenders. And I just think we got to wait and see. And I know we're going to keep waiting and keep seeing because Dak's going into year 10. I don't care.
So it was 2022, the year that they knocked off Brady, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So they beat Brady, I believe, in round 1. I think it was like 31-14, right?
We were the 5 seed that year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then they went on to round 2 and they lost to San Fran, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So was that the Dak Prescott slide game?
I think that was the year prior.
Okay. So that year, San Fran was a better team than them, obviously. It's Philly. That was the year they went to the Super Bowl. They were the better team, obviously.
Kansas City won the Super Bowl that year.
Kansas City. Cincinnati 27-10. Buffalo in their own building. Cincinnati was better. Buffalo and Dallas, I mean, if you want to argue that Dallas is better of the 2 divisional round losers, fair. But like those are the four teams that made the conference championship that year. 1,000% would have beat Dallas, and that's not even talking like Super Bowl. That's just like one-off game, like 1v1 Chiefs versus Dallas that year. Chiefs win. 1v1 Eagles versus Dallas that year. Eagles would have won. I don't think there was a scenario where Dak Prescott or Mike McCarthy with his clock management issues would have taken any team to a Super Bowl.
If the definition of contention is a conference championship appearance, as you said, then they were 1 score away from contention.
That's fine, but
so they're not far from contention. Is that a very fair compromise? Because I think it is. It's according to your logic that they're not far from contention.
During the 3-12-5 season era, yes, they were not far from being in that contender bubble. Right now, absolutely not.
Right now, they're not contenders, but we don't know what Schottenheimer is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's absolutely fair to say that it's questionable at best because it's so risky.
I mean, what's the ceiling with it, though? What's the ceiling for this Dallas team?
He's a really good play caller, or at least he was in Seattle. Dak's still Dak. If you bring back Micah, you draft well. I think the ceiling is 10, maybe 11 wins. But you've got to steal some from every divisional opponent to be able to make the playoffs. And I think that's possible. I mean, we went 2-0 on the Giants this year, and yeah, they might have a quarterback next year, but they're still paying Daniel Jones. So, like, what moves can they make to support that quarterback? Washington could be the next Houston, and year 2 for Jaden Daniels is just a fluke. It's a sophomore slump. And the Eagles are probably going to go 2-0 on us, but when Dak's healthy, they've never gone 2-0 on us. So, I don't know, man. Watch out. Watch out for a frisky 5 seed from Dak and the guys.
I guess we can agree to disagree here. I mean, I don't see the path. I mean, you can draft Gene T and you can have an explosive offense, but I just don't see Coach Schottenheimer putting it all together. But maybe that's just me.
We'll talk in like 11 months.
We'll revisit the conversation. But speaking of former Dallas guys, Kellen Moore, 2 days after winning the Super Bowl, 2 days after Sirianni saying, "Hey man, let's run it back," has accepted the Saints coaching job. Me and you both don't like the move. I think we both think it's a tire fire over there. Their cap situation's terrible. Their draft picks, are average at best. They're in a tough spot. So how do you view this hire?
Pairing it with the Brandon Staley defensive coordinator hire, I think it's one of the worst coaching staffs we've seen in a very long time. I mean, we'll see what Dallas does next year and, how genius Jerry looks for hiring Matty Eberflus as DC. But it's two guys who have overstayed their welcomes a handful of times with, Kellen having no ability to find the end zone as offensive coordinator in Dallas, then going to LA where he has that connection with Brandon Staley and just running a crap show of the offense, which had a lot of talent at that time. Brandon Staley just never having a top defense with a lot of talent in LA. I don't think either of these guys can get the most out of that roster because there's not a lot to go around with that roster.
I do want to give him a pass for his stint in LA. Yeah, it wasn't great, it wasn't pretty, wasn't perfect. But you do lose Justin Herbert like midway through the season. Of course you're not going to have a good unit with whoever they had playing backup quarterback for them then. So I do want to give him a brief pass there. I think you mentioned earlier in the pod, you put anybody as OC, you put yourself as OC in Philly this year, they probably won the Super Bowl. Like, that team was just so ridiculously loaded. Just hand the ball off to Saquon or let Jalen Hurts run it himself, and they would have won the Super Bowl. I don't want to take away from Kellen Moore. I think he's a top 10 play caller in football. I think he had his struggles in Dallas with the red zone inefficiency, like you've mentioned previously. But I think he's set up for failure there, unfortunately, which, in 2 to 3 years with them being a 5 or 6 win team consistently, he may be on his way out already, which is really unfortunate because I do think he has the potential to be a nice head coach, one of those offensive guys, a Shanahan, a McVay, a McDaniel. They really need to figure out their cap situation, and whether that means bringing in a new GM or, just scrapping everything. Let Kamara go. They already traded Marshawn Lattimore. They let Michael Thomas go. Just cut ties with Derek Carr. He's average at absolute best. You just got to rip the threads out. Just start over. Let Kellen bring in whatever guys he wants to bring in. Get any draft pick you can. Free up your cap space so within 2 or 3 years it's at least manageable. And maybe then the Saints can start building something. But until they get the cap situation under control, nobody's going to succeed there.
Yeah, I think we really got to keep them in the same conversation as the Cleveland Browns for the sake of you have a QB and you don't want that QB anymore. You're just paying him a ludicrous amount of money so you can't move on.
100%.
But we've seen enough from Derek Carr to know his time in New Orleans is never going to end in a championship. And I think the quicker you pivot out of that, the better. Yeah,
I mean, you see Saints fans, like, after their 2-0 start this year saying, oh, had that team stayed healthy, they would have been a force to reckon with in the playoffs. Nobody bought into that 2-0 Saints team this year. They
only beat the Panthers and the Cowboys.
Right. Nobody special. So
the pre-Bryce Young benching Panthers, mind you.
Exactly. Those teams weren't, their expectations at the end of the year were vastly different. I think the Saints were just an overhyped 2-0 team at the end of the day. I think most people believe that. Kamara was in and out of the lineup this year. He's kind of always been an injury-prone guy. Mm-hmm. I think that's something to consider when looking into, retaining him. Like you said, I mean, you just got to move out of the Derek Carr deal. It's just you can't justify paying a quarterback a ludicrous amount of money without a good roster around them unless they're like literally Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar. Mm-hmm. I don't even think Jalen Hurts' deal has kicked in yet, which is why the roster's so loaded. And if it has, it's a credit to the Eagles front office being geniuses. But something's got to change. They need to stop charging the credit card and paying it off down the line and hoping it doesn't bite them. Because at this point, a couple years back when they had Breeze and they were really trying to contend in his last couple of years for a chip, it was fine, it was working. But as soon as Breeze retired, you should have hit the reset button, and they didn't, and that was very foolish. So yeah, I think the second they finally decide to hit reset, it'll open up some opportunities for Kellen Moore.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, anything else?
That's everything.
All right, man. Well, thank you guys for watching Blitz Gigs episode 7. Hope you guys enjoyed.
We'll see you in the next one.
For sure.